Ever since I could hold a rifle, I wanted to be like you, Paul. You've always been a tough act to follow. But I'm damn sure gonna try.
Call of Duty has its roots planted all over the Second World War, so it was no surprise that when COD tried returning to its former glory that it went with another World War II themed game within 2017's Call of Duty. But way back before, about 9 years earlier, we had what was Call of Duty's send-off to the World War II genre and would not be woken for quite some time. Two different ways of showcasing the brutality, World at War being more terrifying and down in the thick of it all, while World War II was more noble and heroic. There's so many differences between the two, so why not just pit them up against each other and explore their campaigns? We all know the reputation of this game. Everyone, regardless of playing the campaign, knew that this game had a darker presence. It's unique to World at War. We haven't seen another COD game presented in such a chilling way. Some come close with their deep and impactful storytelling, but none can say they were unsettling all the way throughout. You take a look at every single level and all have something about it that will add to its dark reputation. Instead of focusing purely on our main cast of characters, they are mostly there to drive the events happening around us on a much larger scale. A lot of times you'll see a Marine in the Pacific wielding a flamethrower and burning out a lot of the screaming Japs. Other times you'll be seeing those Marines get ripped to shreds. All this wouldn't be proper without the gore system they have in place, ensuring you'll see some limbs getting blown off. And most likely you will be the one doing the damage yourself. This dark storytelling presence is very crucial in displaying a more authentic experience of the war, which is where Call of Duty World War II lacks. Maybe it's more catered to the time it was released, or maybe they just wanted to go a different route in how they tell a story here, but surely it wouldn't have hindered the experience and instead been a more well-rounded game. They do have a gore system, but it's not as good and can be random on what limbs get torn apart. It does make for good cinematic moments such as the D-Day beach landings where you did witness lots of gruesome things done to the human body. These were the cutscenes. I didn't feel this presence at all during the gameplay. There would occasionally be scenes dispersed throughout the campaign that showed the brutality. On the mission Death Factory, you will encounter a few graphic scenes. This pilot that ejected from his plane, but despite his efforts, was caught dead and stuck hanging in a tree. The context of what's happening around this time is that you were recently just hammered by artillery and separated from the rest of your platoon. You're surrounded by the remains of fellow soldiers and find yourself lurking around this dense forest trying to find them. That's when you stumble on this pilot. Now advance forward a few minutes after sneaking through some enemy lines and you'll see yet again another horrifying display.
Wait! Stop, please! No, God, please! No!
So don't get it completely twisted and think that this game doesn't have its horrific events. It's just a lot more spread out and not the main focus for the most part. But they do add a certain element to each mission, and I have to give props for the developers during the year 2017 when things were starting to become controversial to showcase and many were starting to shy away. These small events that were happening in World at War were what made the game feel much larger in scale and added memorability to each level. Like, oh, this is the level where we wake up in a literal fountain of bodies with the German army surrounding almost every inch of the very ground we lay on. A huge reason why I've come back to visit this campaign are for these moments that made me enjoy the overall experience. So I appreciate that within World War II's version, but at times I wish they did more and made it feel more natural. The biggest problem for me that weighs this game down is simply the amount of forced elements. I'm talking the story, the weak characters, the copycatting from other pieces of World War II media, and just the overall cringe that takes me out of the immersion too many times.
The Krauts are gonna eat your lunch.
No, not our lunch, Sergeant. Our lunch is secure.
Watch your lips, Zussman.
Violated.
A campaign is mostly carried by story while being pushed along by gameplay and level design. At times, I didn't know how to judge World War II. The missions certainly had variety and were always fun enough to me. I really liked the design of most levels and the journey through all these environments. Then I'm constantly taken out of the loop because of how bad the game is trying to mimic other famous World War II movies and games. There are so many times when I've heard lines sound awfully close to something out of Band of Brothers, like almost word for word, and it was happening too many times.
Keep moving. I need to get the spare bandages from your aid kit.
Can I scrounge your bandage from your aid kit, sir?
Got your aid kit?
Can you spare something from your aid kit, sir? I'm real short. I need cigarettes.
Incoming! Incoming!
I feel like these are lines that are forced out there for the sake of appealing to fans from the World War II genre. You could play it off and say these are just references, which they are and in their own way pay homage, but the problem is that it didn't feel like its own game a lot of the time. Sure, plenty of things will cross over, such as the battles we're fighting in, but we're in a completely different perspective and it should feel like that. My favorite game of all time is one called Brothers in Arms, and you could make a case they pulled from them too. The main character is nicknamed Red, and it stands out because of him being a redhead and the only person in the game with that feature. In COD World War II, our main character is also nicknamed Red, and then the cover of the game is also very similar to this piece of artwork from the same franchise. I could be reaching with some of that, but point is I had many story moments where I was taken out of the experience because of lines that came off as corny and trying to be something rather than itself. It was trying more than just referencing. It was trying to copy and made a lot of lines throughout the game feel forced. The characters are the same way. The only one I could stand was Lieutenant Turner and a little of our main character.
Quit screwing around! We hit the State Theater at 07:30 tomorrow.
Everyone else felt out of place, like this wasn't some of the worst moments of their life. I just didn't see that, except with Zussman and his short ending with being captured as a prisoner of war. Pearson is a bully and a pain for very terrible reasons.
You see wings on me, Private? No, Sergeant. That's because I'm not your fairy fucking godmother!
Zussman is alright, but has his moments. Aiella looks way too young for a veteran. Styles is too big of a nerd and doesn't ever really get shaped by the war. That's really my biggest point here. I don't believe this world of events. A lot of moments are incredibly dramatic and are hardly ever earned. On the very first mission, they make it seem like Zussman is going to die and makes a climactic moment happen when everyone barely even knows who this guy is yet.
I got you!
This grenade literally comes from nowhere.
We can get down here!
If you're going to kill him off to add to the casualties of war, then just do it and don't make it feel so grand. But if you are going to do it that way, then it has to be earned. World at War hardly ever did this. When it put characters on the line, it felt a lot more believable. Like this is probably how it'd go down and is realistic in a sense. Chernov got burned to death and the only reaction was that of the players and Reznov giving a heartfelt line.
Dmitri! Someone should read this.
That was it. You as the voiceless protagonist get to experience this moment and not much else detracts from it. A death that wasn't in a cutscene and you get to see firsthand. It puts more emotion in the moment when you get to look around. Advantage of this taking place outside of a cutscene. The execution was the most important part. No cheesy lines, and still the war felt like the driving force here, not the motives of characters. And this happened a few more times with deaths throughout the campaign. When taking a war this big in scale, you have to feel like there's more than just a few soldiers in your little circle. In World War II, you never saw any other men in the platoon led by Lieutenant Turner that is seemingly always around you and the same 4 other guys. What about everyone else? It'd be nice to give it the appearance that you're working as a much bigger unit and no more than just a few guys. There's very few times you talk to a side character. World at War isn't much different, but it does do it a little bit better. You're not surrounded by just the common soldier, but also officers who are leading and commanding a battle as it rages on. Those events of brutal warfare also give more opportunity to hear from side characters.
We thought you were among the dead in the massacre at the square.
He was among them, but not one of them.
We're about to assault the communication post north of here.
Good.
Giving a little insight on their perspective and fleshing out the world around your main cast of characters. It is hard to beat a character like Reznov when you're comparing him to someone like Turner. The storytelling in World at War is mostly dominated by the Russian perspective. It outmatches what we get in the Pacific and is what will capture most people's attention. Starting from your homeland being invaded and millions of deaths occurring, there was a lot brewing from the very beginning with a common viewpoint in mind. Vengeance. The Russian theme songs, and especially the chants from dozens of Russians, has a lot of energy and intimidation behind it. It stuck with me for a while, and I try to find any chance I can talk about it. The Pacific and our perspective through the Marines isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't stand much of a chance. One of the similarities between this and World War II is the use of the flamethrower, and my oh my is it satisfying causing mayhem with it. A lot of you may not care to stand around and look at something. Well, not me. Sometimes a game's scenery will just capture me, you know? That's a strong suit of World War II here. Several times there was just something absolutely stunning going on in the background, and you can just sit around for a bit staring at it. These are details where it's going to add to replayability, not because it's more fun to get through, but it's kind of like a treat, almost like climbing to the top of a mountain and then you get to soak in the view. Playing through all these missions and you get a little reward for your efforts. That's how I take it. It's not just the amazing backdrops though. There's also openings to missions where you can stroll around and check out all these soldiers going about their day before heading out on your mission. It's not as polished here, but it's going the extra mile when it isn't necessary to the progression of the game. World at War never had these moments. You're always jumping straight into a mission, and there are no peaceful spots where you're surrounded by all these soldiers going about their business. I really rag on World War II's story, but the background and look of this game is where it really shines. Several different environments that are drastically different from one another. Fighting in a dense forest, the Battle of the Bulge, being a spy in German territory, the D-Day landings, and so on. It's never a dull moment when it comes to the environment variety here. And there's a lot in World at War II, but it does get held back by age and a lesser budget. You do go from two extremes though, being in a swampy, dense forest full of life and destruction, to then a forest full of dead trees and crumbling structures. You get to see the war rage on from two totally different perspectives. Fighting in the Pacific had brutal conditions, while striking into the heart of Germany had fierce resistance. Scenery is important in establishing tones and moods, but there's something else special about World War II that made it stand out for me.
Anytime, anywhere.
Alright, give him hell, boy!
COD World War II was held up as the game to return Call of Duty back to its roots, meaning no more jetpack and futuristic games. What I thought would return is the feeling we got around the glory days during the time of Modern Warfare and Black Ops, but now with the coded World War II theme. What I didn't expect was for the campaign to go even further back and reach into old game mechanics that I thought would die with the classic Call of Duties. If we flash all the way back, before Call of Duty 2, we had no automatic health regeneration. It was done through health packs you found throughout the level. This returned in a very similar manner, where we had to use medkits to heal rather than sitting behind cover and waiting for you to regenerate. Now honestly, I love this mechanic. The game did still feel easy, but it adds more challenge to the gameplay as you are forced to be more careful with how you approach situations. If you take damage, then you have to hope that you have a medkit ready to use. Part of me does wish they made it harder or gave an option to where instead of backpacking these medkits, you can only use them where you'd find them. Then it really encouraged you to not run and gun. It makes it a little too easy when you can just request a medkit from Zussman whenever you need it. There were other homages here and there. You could feel those end screens at their missions where we were met with music and a war quote.
Our mission is to knock out the German artillery together. But if Pearson sees an opening, he'll take it. Squad be damned. There's a storm brewing between Turner and Pearson, and it's only gonna get worse.
Instead of the war quote, it's narrated dialogue wrapping up what we just did in the mission with some background music giving it a somber feel as it did back in the day. It's not as good, but it is a neat experience added to the playthrough and deserves its props for somewhat returning to a more classic style. But what's really important is the pacing of gameplay and the variety we get, since it can get boring fast doing the same thing with just shooting enemies using the same guns. Luckily for us, both games here do quite a decent job at giving variety. World at War gives us a few missions where we're stepping into tanks and offering us a new way of playing through a mission. Once you're done blasting through troops and enemy tanks, you'll also get to be up in the skies dealing heavy damage and saving sailors. But sometimes the mission can have enough variety by changing its approach. Sometimes you're pushed into a stealth mission where you're using a sniper and must be patient. Another time you're told to pick up a flamethrower and commit great deals of arson. World War II didn't hold back and also gave similar options. Its tank mission was short-lived and not as exciting, but it's enough to switch up the pace. Instead of being a gunner on an airplane, now you're flying one, amongst dozens of others and getting into dogfights. You'll get situations where the approach is switched up, such as the mission where you get to be a spy and have to play a little bit of a memory game with this fake identity of yours. For the most part, I do think World at War executes it better, but World War II tried giving a little more variety. World at War, I believe, executes better overall, and is the better experience to sit through, easily. But World War II has a lot of positives that you can find if you ignore the terrible parts and enjoy what it did good. How I enjoyed playing it was through the gameplay and the cinematic moments it did offer. World at War easily destroys World War II, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. And I actually found it to be more enjoyable than what I remembered. All when I closed out the cringy story and instead focused on the world building, gameplay, and environments.